Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. And this week we'll be talking to Kerry Fox on the Salem Food Co-op. So welcome to the show, Kerry.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you know, I was kind of a little perplexed when I heard about it. And I was kind of curious because we have Life Source and some other places in town where you can get like organic foods and like that. So I kind of wanted to ask you about what you saw as the need that the co-op could fulfill here in Salem.
Well, it seemed to me I came here from Humboldt most directly, and I lived overseas. But prior to that, I was in Montana, and I lived in Minneapolis. So I've always lived where there's been a food co-op, where it's been worker member owned. The decision making is all democratic. So Life Source is a great store, and they support us. Our formation as well, which is really generous, really nice. But I was struck by the huge amount of food deserts, which is where you don't have access to food
Fresh,
for 3 miles.
Nutritional food.
Right, for 3 miles. So, I felt like I was living in a food desert, coming from a place where I could get food that was fresh, local, organic, and it was obvious that the people who shop there have some say in the decision making of the store. So Life Source to me is close to a co-op, but it's not quite what I was ready for. And also it's in one location, and I like to I'm a bike commuter, and so that's inaccessible for me in that realm, transportation.
Yeah, because you live downtown or midtown, and you know that'd be kind of a fairly long distance on a bike with groceries. Okay. Well, I mean that was the thing that came up, and I should mention that I actually saw somebody tabling at the indoor farmers market on Saturday on Rural, and that's how I kind of found out about the co-op itself. And so, but that is another source. But both of those, even the Saturday market and the Wednesday market that run during the summer months, are basically downtown. And also you have the rural market, which is kind of close to downtown. But there's really nothing over then on the east side as well.
Right, and we so the rural market location is right now our location, but we're a virtual store at this time, which means we offer our products through the internet, and then the members, the shoppers pick up their food at the rural market the third Thursday of the month, and we will deliver also. So we're
okay. So if they place an order for something, they can go down and pick it up on Thursdays?
Once a month right now.
Once a month.
Because it's all voluntary. No one in the organization is earning anything. Every dollar, every penny we make, we're putting in a savings. We bought a commercial-sized refrigerator that we're using, so we're growing bit by bit. So the rural market we're also there on Saturdays, so that's where you saw someone was at our...
You have a little table and a display.
But we need a bigger location, actually.
Well, yes, that is it's like a very small booth.
Well, and also to speak to your first question, we having a food co-op can offer other outlets for local farmers. So we offer food that's locally grown. We have a lot of produce from a variety of farmers in the community. We have partnered with a group called Port Orford Sustainable Seafood, and so we have fresh frozen seafood that's sustainably harvested, and then our suppliers, Hummingbird from Corvallis and Azure Standard from Dufur. So it's just a bringing together of many sources, and so once we gain traction, part of our vision is that we will also be able to help increase the number of producers in the valley, or what, So by supporting local producers, we're also supporting stewardship of our surrounding land, and therefore, clean soil, clean water. We're just helping to increase the stewardship of our surrounding area.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because I can remember years ago interviewing someone who told me that the average item on your dinner plate traveled 1,300 miles
Yeah.
before it got to you.
Yeah.
And here in the Willamette Valley, there's no excuse for that kind of
Exactly.
behavior.
Exactly.
And also that is very then dependent on cheap fossil fuel. And so the thing is that I kind of worry about, maybe not in my lifetime, but the fact is that we've become dependent on this cheap fossil fuel. And if all the systems are set up for long distance travel for your food, then those local producers don't have the business, and a lot of times they don't have the wherewithal to stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
So by having this local group that is bringing food to people, that helps that situation and gives us more diversity about where we're getting our food from, so that it's not just all being shipped from someplace.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the fact that we also are very passionate about education. So on our website, salemfood.coop, you can find information. We have a member that's blogging. We have people putting recipes, but also information. The bill recently that many people referred to as a Monsanto bill.
Right.
We lobbied for that. We lobbied against it.
Yeah.
But we spent some time in the legislature. We put information on the website. So also in the spirit of cooperatives, we help support other emerging cooperatives. There's a place called Know Thy Food that's up towards Portland. So we're educating. We're out there to educate people about the distance their food travels. And, cheap is in quotes
right,
in my
right.
mind, because cheap it impacts somebody else somewhere else.
Well, yeah, because they don't include the cost for healthcare of all the asthma that it causes, or other kinds of diseases, based on, this cheap fuel, and global warming. They don't include that cost because they're making the profit as, a capitalist or whatever you want to call them, but then the real cost gets spread out to the society at large.
Well, and that also comes around also as thinking of leakages. The more people are supporting local producers and local economy, the better we all are off, because it raises our quality of life in general. Whereas if you're buying cheap food somewhere, the money's leaving the community.
Your area, right.
Yeah.
And, it's also interesting, too, about cooperatives, because, we claim to be a democracy, but, when it comes to, the main interactions with society, like going to work, and if you have to deal with the justice system or something like that, it's not very democratic. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's good for people to learn how to be responsible for their own environment, and getting their own food is definitely one of those items, and then working with other people and trying to come to group decisions, because that to me is real democracy. Mm-hmm. And the more experience people get with real democracy, the more invested they are in not letting other people make the decisions for them, but making their own decisions about what works best for them.
Well, and that's what we're experiencing already with our democracy, because we're a consensus decision board. So they say democracy is messy, and it's true. But we're all of similar mind. So, but we have really interesting dialogues, and our decision-making process is really democratic. And we're really very passionate about the democracy aspect of a cooperative. And we hope to have our members get more and more engaged in that aspect of it as well. We'd love them to come to any meeting, all meetings. We'd love to hear their feedback on everything, because sometimes people will say, well, you should do this or you should do that, and we're saying it's yours.
Right.
If you're a member, it's your
Well, yeah, because one of the things I've seen in my lifetime is people will come up and say, oh, you should be doing this or that, but they're not willing to do it. Mm-hmm. They're quite willing to have other people do it for them. But, that's part of being in a group, a society. You all take on roles and help out make the society better. And I think that's what happens when you get this kind of top-down management or top-down thinking, is people think somebody up above is making the decisions, and I just need to make a recommendation. Maybe they'll follow it, maybe they won't. But the thing is, we live in a society. and we all need to participate. We all need to take responsibility for, what happens in that society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's disempowering, I think, when, even though it can be, if things are running well, it seems fine, but when you're not when your voice isn't being heard, it's a different story.
Right.
Especially if the decisions are not going your way. So with our food sovereignty, or lack thereof, that, I guess part of what I was thinking when you were talking about people being involved, I do recognize that people, with our current economy, people are so busy trying to make ends meet. It's hard to get involved with things. But yeah, to have that awareness that a change can be made if we persist and work towards, get involved in things where people like the food co-op are working towards bringing people together to support our local food system, then they can feel a bit more empowered, I think.
Yeah, one of the things I used to like to point out to people, that, because they were always saying that, well, we never have enough time, is that I used to point out in the Middle Ages they had over 100 feast days. And basically what it was a bbig parade throughout the town. It'd snake all through the town. Everybody would be out there having a good time. And a lot of that happened after the harvest, obviously, in the fall. But they had feast days all the time. And people take the day off and just do things. And they weren't tied to a desk or whatever, 5 days a week, a minimum of 40 hours a week. So I think people need to realize that it hasn't always been that way. And one of the things, too, is that, like, over the last, say, 30 or 40 years, American productivity has gone up, although the wages have remained stagnant, flat, for basically since the early 70s.
And so who's that productivity been for?
Yeah, right. And it doesn't mean that they're getting less hours to work. It means they're working harder for those hours that they do work. And there's fewer and fewer people needed. So I think that, like, for one thing, we should have reduced hours so people do have time to do other things as part of the society, or, the infrastructure of how we live today.
Well, there is, one thing I should mention is the Salem Food Co-op is part of a bigger umbrella, Salem Cooperatives.
Oh, okay.
So one of our board members can speak really well to this because he's been working really hard on a lot of it. But so we created Salem Cooperatives, and Salem Food Co-op is one of the original spokes of that. But it's this idea of engaging the people more in our community resiliency. Because when you were speaking of earning power, I was thinking of a dependence on a currency. And so that forces people to have to put their energy into something where they can gain dollars, and where the real value is what really adds to our life force. It's our food, and it's our rest. And if we're being overworked just to gain scarce dollars, to me it makes sense to look at what truly is value and what brings us our sustenance and our energy and our satisfaction. And for me, it's eating well, and it's spending time with those in my community, like having feast days, as you mentioned. And that's very true. It's I can't quite speak to the exact ratios, but I've heard that primitive societies worked 4 hours a day to meet their needs, and then because they were working all together. And we've been divided, the division we see between, in our government system is like just a piece of the divisions we've been encouraged to have in our community, where it's like all for, I'll take care of myself and maybe be able to take care of you. But if we think about taking care of each other, we're a stronger web.
Well, it's kind of interesting because most religions talk basically about how to get along with others, and that's basically what religion is about, is how to survive as a group, not as an individual. You might get individual salvation, but a lot of the messages about violence and everything else are geared toward making the society work better. At least that's how I view it. But I was kind of curious too, because you were talking about you kind of give information to the members of the co-op on like recipes and things like that. Do you also do much in the way of like nutrition, about what are good foods and what are things to avoid? And
a bit. We have a member that's a life coach.
Oh, okay.
So she would delve into that more in her information. We're encouraging to get information from other members as well if other people have that. But it can be but yes, we do shorten the short and sweet.
Because I know that like I recently changed my diet quite a bit, and it's like you kind of need some reinforcement when you're starting doing something like that, and some guidance about how to do certain things. And the recipes help too, because like otherwise it's like, okay, so I want to do this, but what exactly how am I going to do that? And so and that's where actually I've noticed that like fresh fruits, locally grown fresh fruits, are better for you because they don't lose all that nutritional value, going all that distance. And so that's another point that I think sometimes people forget about when they go to like those big box stores to get big boxes of, well, it's just funny because I remember going into one and seeing like a 20-pound box of Quaker Oats, and I'm going, it's going to take me a long time to get through 20 pounds of Quaker Oats, and like by the time you get through with it, it's like I'm sure the bugs have discovered it by then, So I mean, buying stuff in bulk is okay if you've got a lot of people, but not necessarily for a small family.
Well, thank you. You point up a few things. One is cheap food, and again, our food. What we do is we buy wholesale, and then we charge a markup for members and a markup for non-members, and we keep in mind that eventually we will have a store, so we don't want a big price shock for people.
Right.
But it's still organic, clean, local food isn't going to be as cheap as Costco, but it's local, it's rich, it is rich food.
You're getting more nutrition for that.
The nutrition in it, yes. So there is that. And also on the other side of things is some, food that's grown and brought to us from China not only has that petroleum aspect that is not calculated into the price, but also the livelihoods of those who is producing it. What's the pay?
Right.
What's the amount those people are getting for their labor, and what's being supported by buying cheap food. Some of it is because that organization can buy it in big amounts because they have these folks. Because Costco is a cooperative; it's a member-owned sort of thing. But it's these huge items, and so there's some give and take there. The other, you mentioned. The bugs getting to it.
I was just thinking about.
I was going to talk about splits. So, on our site, when you buy, Hummingbird will offer us. We can buy like 25-pound bag of oats, 25-pound, 50-pound bag of beans, and on the site, you can say, "I really just want 5 pounds." So, and we have a minimum maximum. So you can say, well, at the minimum, I'd want 3 pounds of beans. At the maximum, maybe 8 pounds of beans. Then other people can go on and see in red. If something's in red, it means it's not filled yet. So then people can fill that they can split that 25-pound bag or that 50-pound bag.
Oh, okay. So you could say that you wanted 3 pounds, and I could say that I wanted 7 or 8 or something like that, and then somebody else, Patrick in the control room wants another 10. So then you could get up to the 25, and then you buy the bag, and then you split it up.
And that decreases the cost a bit from what you pay because you're buying a bigger amount. So that's a benefit as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times people think in terms of calories when they're thinking about food, and that's one of the reasons why I was bringing up nutrition, because it's not calories specifically, it's the nutritional value you get from that food that's important. And I think a lot of times people kind of lose sight of that, and that's one of the things that you quite often don't get the full nutritional value of those foods when you buy them at those big stores that are transported them long distances.
Yeah, my husband and I go around, we talk a lot about food and nutrition actually, and I juice in the morning, so I'll use fresh vegetables and fruits to juice. And so I'm getting a lot of nutrition and calories, but it's my body's able to use it more effectively. But one argument that my husband will make is when it's fresh, when it comes from local produce. I guess the point I'm trying to make is the amount doesn't seem to matter so much. And we don't crave, you know how sometimes if you're getting fast food, you're getting that processed food, you tend to crave crazy things, and you even though you know you're not really hungry, you're eating more.
Well, if you think about it, 400 calories of vegetables would fill up your stomach, whereas 400 calories of meat or something like that would take up a very small portion of your stomach. And I think, that's why people sometimes have this like, oh, I'm not full. And I think that's partially has to do with a meat-oriented diet as opposed to vegetables and grains and like that.
Well, and we do, like, I'm not vegetarian, I'm an omnivore, but I don't eat as much meat. But the meat I do eat now, because we don't currently offer this, but we do have another source in the community where we get free-range, grass-fed meats. So I know it's clean. I know that my body's not getting impacted in a weird way because it's genetically modified, for example.
Yeah. See, when I talk about nutrition, it's not being strict vegetarian, because you can get nutritional values from meat. But I've tried to go vegetarian, and occasionally there's just not any other choices. So I'm not going to feel bad about it if I have a tuna sandwich, because that's all really that's available. And
you can get tuna through the co-op.
Well, that's true. But well, I'm talking about quite often if I'm on the road. Your selections then get narrowed quite severely. And I ran into this a few weeks ago when I went down to visit my sister-in-law and my wife's family in Southern California. It became very difficult to stay vegetarian because it just really didn't lend itself to it.
Well, the more there's communities that focus on their local food source and have a cooperative, then you can move your way down the coast and find those sources.
Well,
but also you can you could buy a bunch of almonds, you could buy nuts, and you could
I did
bring
take
those
some with me,
you
but
down.
I ran out. But it was. I was kind of cracking up on the way down, because as I'm going down Highway 5 in Central and Southern California, they have all these signs up about water. The water crisis created by Congress, and I'm sitting there looking at this land that's parched. I mean, it's semi-desert. They maybe get 10 inches of rain a year, and they're complaining about not getting enough water. Well, I mean, look at where you are. I mean, you have to import all your water. And there's another cost that quite often isn't really calculated by people, because you got to run all those pumps to get the water there. You're degrading the water, say, like in the San Francisco Bay, because of it and like that. So, I mean, there's lots of costs to farming semi-desert.
Oh, yeah.
And so here, there's no reason for it.
Right. We're in honestly, for the way that the weather's patterns are all changing and shifting, we're in a pretty nirvana type spot, really.
Well, yes.
And we should be really aware of that, I think.
Yeah, I feel really sorry for my brother who decided to move to Bakersfield, but that's another story. I try to warn him. But so the co-op is down at the indoor Saturday market on Rural, and you can place your orders online.
Yeah, salemfood.coop.
Okay, and so you're hoping to get a store at some point. That's like your next goal. Is that your next goal, to get a store?
Well, we would like to find a place that's a little bit bigger than where we are at the market.
Okay.
So we figured we need about 500 square feet. We're hoping that there's someone out there. There's many places that are just empty, and we'd love to help bring life to that space. Hopefully somewhere like a little north of downtown, perhaps, but so we can have a place and have more members who can volunteer, because volunteers get a 5% discount, and have volunteers help us so that we can have something open 5 days a week for a few hours a day.
Right.
So that would be a nice next step. And then that would help us gain more traction financially, and then we could have a store. And the other piece that I want to make sure I mention that's exciting is we'd like to also have a food truck that we can bring food out into other places in the community regularly.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because when you were talking about getting a store, I was thinking about, you know, there's a lot of places around town where it's hard for people to get food, good food. And, you know, if you have one store, then you're just kind of localized and everybody has to come there. But a truck would be nice.
Yeah, we'd have to definitely work out the logistics.
Right.
But we're really, that is a part of our vision that will keep happening. So in the store too, so our vision is to have our store, to have community meeting space in the store, to have a community kitchen in the store and classes, and but then also have an outreach aspect where we have a truck that regularly has, it would be like
have a route.
like a burrito store, but it would be selling beans, rice, oats, whatever, you know.
Well, like Swans has a truck that goes around, makes deliveries and like that. And I mean, I was thinking of, you know, like you have a truck that goes kind of like on a route where people know it's going to be here at such and such a time. And
right. So then they can say, oh, you know, I could really love, I need some more rice and I'd like to have some dried, some dried fruit. And so we would, you know, of course not be able to bring everything from the whole store, but we could bring some produce too and have some fresh produce and maybe be able to show some hands-on how to, you know, talk to people about how to prepare things as well.
Because sometimes that's an important part of it. And also not, I know that sometimes making some of these dishes are very complicated and time consuming. So sometimes shortcuts would be helpful in when you're training or, you know, kind of gathering information about.
Right. It can be intimidating. It even was for me. It's not been that long that I've been mostly just cooking good food at home and eating food from home. But there are shortcuts. There are ways, you know, if you think about how much time people will spend on the computer, just cruising around on the computer, you could take some of that time and make some really great food that it's not that complicated. So we'd be able, through our blog currently on salemfood.coop, people can find some ideas about their food and making food, but we'd love to be able to have outreach face-to-face.
Well, yeah, and like I said before, it kind of helps reinforce things if you're seeing them all the time, you know, or people know they can go someplace and get some help. And we're just about out of time, and I want to thank you, Kerry, for coming down and sharing about the food co-op.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. And so anyway, it's been the Valley View, and come back next week, and we'll be on a different topic.